Shalom, 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 everybody. Everybody, just a second. Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington. And we're going to pick up with Mr. Marcus Garvey. Mr. Marcus Garvey. Shot everything I need. Chapter 12, Leadership, Part 2. We're going to pick up on Mr. Marcus Garvey at The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man by Shahrazad Ali, Dr. Shahrazad. Marcus Moses Garvey, 1887 to 1940. He organized and established the Universal Negro Improvement Association in Jamaica in 1914 and in Harlem in 1917. He was born in Jamaica and was politically active there as well. On his way to America in 1912, he traveled to England to raise funds for his ideas. And while there, he studied African history regarding the exploitation of blacks by white colonialism. He also studied the works of Booker T. Washington and liked the self-help theory, which I do as well, as a way to make blacks independent of America and around the world. He published his own UNIA, newspapers, organized several chapters of his group around the country. His slogan was Africa for Africans, and he touted suggestions on Negroes contributed financially to his repatriation ideas. Garvey said, "Be as proud of your race today as our fathers were the day of yore." Of yore. Let's see what that means. Yore. Y-O-R-E. Yore. Yore. Already. Y-O-R-E. Yore. Mr. Marcus Garvey. I don't know very much about Mr. Marcus Garvey. I know a little bit, but not much. I wouldn't mind seeing what book he has. Yore. Only in the archaic phrase of yore, long ago, in days of yore. Okay. Come on. Be as proud of your race today as your fathers were in days of long ago, or days of yore. He tried to instill a sense of collective pride and self-esteem by reminding blacks of their history and culture. He taught that the pale man was evil and we're not the chosen people of God. He told blacks that their God was named Allah. Garvey was a Muslim at heart and wanted blacks' belief that he is going to possess himself of things that others have fought and died for, is to build up in his mind false hopes never to be realized. He said, teach a Negro to do for himself. Help him the best way possible in that direction, but to encourage him into belief that he is going to possess himself of things that others have fought and died for, is to build up in his mind false hopes never to be realized. He had no confidence in the ability of whites to treat the Negro fairly. He told them to rely on self-reliance and economic development. He informed Negroes that a race that is solely dependent upon another for its economic assistance sooner or later dies. Garvey disagreed with W.E. Du Bois and the NAACP for their sniveling, unmanly-like methods for social equality with whites. He was critical of Du Bois' efforts for Negro acceptance into white society instead of just trying to leave. He called the white members of the NAACP hypocrites because, Negroes were so entrenched into European Christianity. Although a Muslim, Garvey created for the Negro their own version of Christianity and formed the African Orthodox Church. He decorated with the Black Holy Trinity, a Black Jesus, and a Black Madonna. At one point, as a show of solidarity, over 50,000 Garveyites paraded down Lenox Avenue in New York and held a mass meeting at Madison Square Garden. Garvey established the colors of red, black, and green for his flag and wore stunning, brightly colored military-type uniforms of mainly purple and gold. He invested his followers' money into the Back to Africa movement and purchased a few heavy freighters to transport blacks back home to Africa. He had chosen Liberia as the promised land for Negroes, but due to political pressure applied by America and slightly opposing political viewpoints, the Liberians rejected him and withdrew their support of his project. The ships, never quite functional due to age, were wrought with labor and mechanical problems due to unqualified help. Garvey wanted Negroes, to found their own nation, business, and military. I guess it should be fun. Garvey wanted Nubian Negroes, I'm gonna read out this, to found their own nation, business, and military. He was so proud of his jet black skin, referring to himself as a full-blooded black man, that he insisted that all of his top laborers be dark-skinned. He instructed black women to dress modest and involved them in study classes to learn nursing and other skills. The female followers dressed in all white. Garvey charged Father Divine with blasphemy of the worst kind for his attempt to pose as God of the people. He charged Divine with being backed by the Ku Klux Klan and the Black League of Detroit. He was also not impressed with the efforts of Negroes to be in show business and star in movies. He denounced films such as Green Pastures, Sanders of the River, Emperor Jones, and Imitation of Life. He said the movies represented an international conspiracy to disparage and crush the aspirations of Negroes in American civilization and to impress them that they are inferior. He scolded the Negro actors and actresses in these films for prostituting their manhood and womanhood and their self-respect for the enrichment of imperial masters and purveyors of race prejudice. Purveyors. 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 P-U-R-V. Purvey. To supply, to provide. P-U-R. Purveyor. That's the word I want. Purveyor. one that pervade, one that supplies, one that pervade, to supply as a matter of business. Peddle, peddle. I like peddle. Let me see. He scolded the Negro actors and actresses in the films for prostituting their manhood and womanhood and their self-respect for the enrichment of imperial masters and peddlers of race prejudice. And peddlers of, enrichment of imperial masters and the suppliers as a matter of business of race prejudice. I think it's peddle, but purveyors. Purveyors of race prejudice. Garvey told blacks they should return to Africa just like Jews were planning to return to Palestine. Many white organizations agreed with Garvey and his plans to deport Negroes back to Africa, but he would accept no help from them and kept them out of the Universal Negro Improvement Association's business. When asked what a Soviet state, but a democracy fashioned after the United States, and yet nations, he was not interested in asking the American government for help or assistance of any kind. Garvey maintained that the only way the Negro could become psychologically and economically, that blacks hated and despised themselves so much, and he advised them to stay away from whites. He tried to tell the Negroes that if they did not organize and determine their own destiny, including food, clothing, and shelter, that they would have no power or authority over their lives. Grow your own food. Grow your own food. He tried to tell Negroes that if they did not organize and determine their own destiny, including food, clothing, and shelter, that they would have no power or authority over their lives. He knew he could attract them with flashy uniforms and brightly colored garments and loud, joyful music. Garvey kept the name he was born with, which was not African. He taught black pride, history, and culture in his classes and sought to improve the Negro's opinion about themselves throughout revitalization of their ancient heritage and religion. He did not force Islam on them and remained secular himself. Garvey invested his followers' donations in the purchase of a few ships he intended to use to take them back to Africa. He wanted to get the Negro out of America as soon as possible because he felt the political climate was not conducive to resuscitating the ex-slaves into independence. He used positions of Booker T. Washington's self-help doctrine and strongly disagreed with W.E.B. Du Bois about his claims that only 10% of blacks, mainly mulattoes like Du Bois, held the keys to African American survival. Garvey's bloodline was survived, and his descendants have tried to no avail to reinstitute his program. There are a few scattered branches of the UNIA today. Garvey devised a huge project to convince blacks to abandon America and go back home to be free. He did not have enough support or interest from uppity Negroes who had already decided to use politics and education to improve their conditions. After Liberia pulled out and withdrew their agreement to allow Garvey to land the ships filled with Negroes on their shores, we'd have been refugees then. What would have been refugees then? I wonder if it would have been refugees then. refugees, or what is it called? When you leave a place of refugees, or what is it called when somebody who kidnapped is returned home? I wonder what it's called. After Libya pulled out and withdrew their agreement to allow Garvey to land his ships filled with Negroes on their shores, his followers lost faith and began rejecting his entire program. Garvey started having problems with the IRS and licensure bureaus and the newspapers. Both black and white were against him and circulated stories that he was a con man and racist. In 1923, he was failed by conspiratorial trumped up charges that he was committing mail fraud. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison at the Alabama Penitentiary. And in 1927, he was deported and shamed to Jamaica and died in London a dozen years later. He died grief-stricken about his failure to get Negroes to go back to Africa. I might have to read Mr. Garvey's book. William E. Du Bois, 1868 to 1963. Let's see what he did. Was a scholar in every sense of the word. He attended several prestigious colleges and earned the first PhD to be conferred on a Negro at Harvard University. He was spurred into political action because of his disagreement with Booker T. Washington's plan for the Negro, which he termed a gospel of work and money. He claimed that Booker T's ideas of education dissuaded Negroes from demanding civil rights and practically accepted the alleged inferiority of the Negro. He said manly self-respect is worth more than land and houses, and a people who voluntarily surrender such respect or cease striving for it are not worth civilizing. He said, manly self-respect is worth more than land and houses, and a people who voluntarily surrender such respect or cease striving for it are not worth civilizing. Du Bois was on the faculty of several colleges and universities, including Atlanta University and Morehouse, then called the Atlanta Baptist College. He worked for Negro advancement through acquiring academic skills and preparation to enter mainstream America. He saw America as this common fatherland. He is most known for his suggestion that the talented 10% of the Black race be academically trained to rise and pull behind it the rest of the Negroes. These 10%ers would represent the cream of the crop of the Negro race. He felt that sacrifices should be made to ensure that total education and urged He felt that sacrifices should be made to ensure their total education and urged Black parents to send their children to the best colleges. In a speech he made in 1903, called The Training of Negroes for Social Power, he concluded, the history of civilization seems to prove that no group or nation which seeks advancement to true development can despise or neglect the power of well-trained minds. And this power of intellectual leadership must be given to the talented 10th among American Negroes before this race can seriously be asked to assume the responsibility of dispelling its own ignorance. Part of his text was purposely used as a political ploy to counteract Booker T. Washington's ideas about industrial education as opposing to liberal arts. I don't see why you can't do both. I don't see why you can't do both. Because people learn different. People learn different. You have people who are going to excel the way W.E. Du Bois would want them to, and then you still gonna need the workers. Once you got the people to the top who can pull everybody, you still need the people to build the infrastructure. So you'll need both. Part of his text was purposely used as a political ploy to counteract Booker T. Washington's ideas about industrial education as opposed to liberal arts. Du Bois wrote and distributed serious papers objecting to Washington's weak-kneed attempt to merge with Southern races by vowing to stay away from them by working. Sounds like a good idea. He also feared Washington's tactics would promote the Negro's political disfranchisement and pave the way for withdrawal of federal aid from institutions of higher learning for blacks. He wrote viciously against Tuskegee and gathered together 29 Negro teachers, editors, and professional men from 14 states to meet up with him in 1905 to discuss ways to dethrone the popularity of Booker T's self-help theory. These black men leaders called their meeting the Niagara Movement. The Niagara Movement. Good question. The Niagara Movement. Part of the purpose of this meeting was to protest whites taking back their seats in government and discounting and refusing to recognize the black man's ballot. Du Bois, having traveled abroad and partially educated in Berlin, believed that political empowerment was the only key to protecting blacks from the wrath of angry whites and ensuring their equal treatment, voting, and civil right opportunities. He said, "We will not be satisfied to take one jot or little less than our full manhood rights. We claim for ourselves every single right that belongs to a freeborn American, political, civil, and social. And until we get these rights, we will never cease to protest and assail the ears of America. The battle we wage is not for ourselves alone, but for all true Americans." The Niagara Movement Committee met several times to address the political needs of Negroes. Although credited with stimulating the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, actually, this organization developed from a conference of white liberals in protest against the local lynching. Their first meeting was held in New York City in 1909 to address the renewal of the struggle for civil and political liberty. Several blacks were invited, and Du Bois was one of the 8 who attended from the Niagara Movement Committee. Du Bois was eventually appointed as director of publicity and research and edited their publication called Crisis. The first NAACP organized this first NAACP organized to stand for the rights of men, irrespective of color or race, for the highest ideals of American democracy, and for a reasonable but earnest and persistent attempt to gain these rights and realize these ideals. By 1921, the NAACP had more than 400 branches and was integrated. A white male still headed the NAACP up until the early 1940s. Du Bois wrote several books about Negroes and many papers on the status of the race as a whole. He worked diligently for the goals of the NAACP, taught at various universities, and continued protesting against ill treatment of Negroes and continued to negotiate politically for the rights of the black man to vote. He had mild success in achieving his aims, later immigrating to Africa in 1961 to work with a publishing firm. He left America frustrated and disappointed that he had not been able to sway all Negroes to his talented 10th idea for advancement. He was equally despaired about his inability to force the American government to give Negroes the same social and civil rights that whites enjoyed naturally. Yeah, that shit wasn't gonna happen. I think if everybody could have came together, that's always seems to be the thing. Getting on the same page, or at least enough. And everybody ain't got to get on the same page. It's got to be enough people who really want to do something, can get some shit done. And if don't nobody else want to do it until it get done, okay. As long as it get done. You don't want to help? You don't see it that way? All right, fine. Conclusion. Du Bois was representative of today's Bourgeois class of blacks who still believe that only a certain segment of intelligent African Americans are qualified to lead or remedy the black condition. Most of those in Du Bois' talented 10th representation were light-skinned and straight hair, and like himself, appeared to come from mixed heritage containing precious Caucasian blood. He believed in social integration justifiable by media support, philanthropy, and federal subsidy gains he sought through political means. He was a Christian. He was not as much concerned with economic gain through self-help as he was through securing voting rights, judicial protection, and equal representation in the annals of government. He was very proud of his French, Dutch ancestry and his unusual exotic sounding last name, Dubois, or Du Bois. His only concern for black pride was his insistence that the black male ego enjoy the satisfaction of full acceptance into the category of respect and recognition of his ability to excel academically. He felt that everyday working Negro was primitive. And unsophisticated and unqualified to compete with whites in the classroom or boardroom. Du Bois, I don't know why I want to say Du Bois. Du Bois, or is it Du Bois? I thought it was W.E.B. Du Bois' loud public disagreement with the ideas of Booker T. Washington set the stage for justification of other Negroes to organize to defeat any black who they did not completely agree with in principle and cause. There we go. Could that be the start? Du Bois' loud public disagreement with the ideas of Booker T. Washington set the stage for justification of other Negroes to organize to defeat any black who they did not completely agree with in principle and cause. This kind of squabbling produced political disharmony, physical fighting, and wasted energy on trying to wreck the progress of other black men leaders. Du Bois' ideas of creating Du Bois' idea Du Bois' idea of creating separate factions inside a group already separated upheld the emotions of jealousy, envy, and rivalry among black men that still exist today. Obtaining the glorified, overrated right to vote has proved to be ineffectual towards improving the quality of life for blacks in America or elsewhere. Du Bois himself recognized the futility of struggling against the white rules in America and decided to seek citizenship elsewhere. That's what I was thinking. Thus, he migrated to Africa and became a communist. Plans to erect a statue in his hometown of Barrington, Massachusetts, was initially rejected because of his affiliation with the Communist Party. Du Bois' idea represented the foundation of ideas that give the Democratic Party such attraction for blacks because he stood for social rather than economic advancement. And he fostered a class distinction among Negroes. Give me a second. Let me check on my food. My bad. My turkey neck's about to fall off the bone. Ooh. All right. Trying to see, man, because we're moving right now tonight. We're moving tonight. I like the way I'm reading tonight. We're going to see. We're going to see how it goes. Oh, Lord. What's going on? What's going on? Huh? Hey, stop, both of y'all. Stay back. I'm telling them to stay back. You get up here with Daddy. All right. Let's read about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Hey, get your butt down for now. 1897 to 1975. In 1933, Elijah Muhammad, formerly Elijah Powell, announced that he had been taught a new religion called Islam. He had been taught a new religion called Islam, which had a plan for the ultimate salvation of the Negro. He described his teacher as Master W.E.B. Fard Muhammad, Allah, God in person, and said, Allah. He described his teacher as Master W.D. Fard Muhammad, Allah, God in person, and said that he had been divinely commissioned by Allah to help Negroes secure freedom, justice, equality, money, good homes, and friendships in all walks of life. Muhammad started small but quickly and progressively expanded his new religious teachings from border to border. He called the Negro Muslims and told them that all Black people are Muslims. Some of them just don't know it. He established mosque temples of Islam and taught his followers a new Black history, respect for the family unit. I'm trying to see. Let's see what we got on here. What is this? Respect for the family unit. Family unit. Unit, that's right. Unit. Identified unit. The family. Respect for the family unit. Identified whites as a race of devils. He told them that their God, Allah, was Black. Mr. Muhammad organized schools for the children as his followers, a school of schools for the children of his followers, and separated the boys from the girls during the early years of their education. He directed the Muslims in opening their own businesses, how to pool their resources and build and operate decent institutions of their own. Muslims participated in weekly services and daily prayers, lived under strict behavioral codes, and were required to abstain from eating pork of any form. Muslim men attended weekly manhood training meetings, I think that's called the Fruit of Islam, the FOI, which also provided military training. Mr. Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, forbade his members to carry weapons, not even a penknife. He told them to fight only if aggressed, and to obey those in authority over you, as long as it does not conflict with the practice of your religion. He cleaned Black men up and salvaged and repaired many damaged personalities among them. He used Islam to mold them into neat, obedient, upright, loyal workers and brothers. They were royal blue uniform. They wore royal blue uniforms with matching bow ties. The women, the sisters, were required to attend weekly homemaking skill classes and Sunday or weekly services. They dressed in long dresses, usually white, with headpiece coverings similar to those of nuns. The sisters section was called the Muslim Girls Training and General Civilization class, MTG and GCC. They were taught cooking, sewing, child rearing, how to take care. No, we're up here. Let's see what I need to mark that. Let's mark what they was taught. Yeah, what was the ladies taught? They were taught cooking, sewing, child rearing, child rearing, rearing, child rearing, rearing. I got the mark. I got the mark right here. How to take care of their husbands, and how to act at home and abroad. I like that. I like all that. We need that training now. Let's see what the brothers.
That one.
Let me see. The women were required to attend weekly homemaking skill classes and Sunday or weekend services. They dressed in long dresses, usually white, with headpiece coverings similar to those of nuns. Yeah, nun. Let's see what the men, go back to the men. Muslim men attended. The men attended weekly manhood training meetings, which also provided military training. Yeah, military training. He used Islam to mold them into neat, obedient, upright, loyal workers and brothers. Luke, be careful, my boy. Get my dictionary. Muslim sisters were a very respected group because it was well known that the FOI did not allow anyone to disrespect a member of the MTG and GCC. Messenger Muhammad stressed black culture, rearranged white history to, he stressed black culture, rearranged white history to reveal the black man's contributions to civilization, called for separation in another state completely run by the brothers, who he described as the original man. Whites were not welcome at his temples, and he declined participation in politics and voting. He frowned on social integration and told black men to stop asking others to do things for him, which he could do for himself. I like that. Definitely like that. Whites were not welcome at his temple, and he declined participation in politics and voting. He frowned on social integration and told black men to stop asking others to do things for him which he could do for himself. He insisted on self-reliance for his congregation and advised blacks to stop spending your money on fine clothes and fine shoes before you have a fine place to live. I agree with that too. The Muslims have a large newspaper operation called Muhammad Speaks and use the Holy Quran by Maulana Muhammad Ali as their guide. Messengers were also required to study documented lessons about God, black history, world facts, and general orders which they were instructed to learn verbatim. Shit. Yeah, ain't nothing wrong with that. Members were also required to study documented lessons about God, black history, world facts, and general orders that they were instructed to learn verbatim. They completely rejected Christianity as a false white man made-up religion, and there was no singing, dancing, shouting, or baptism, or white stationaries in their Islamic temples. Huh? You got the dictionary. Dictionary. Farmland was purchased, canneries set up, and meat processing plants expanded to include fish from a foreign country. I like that part. Farmland was purchased, canneries set up, and meat processing plants expanded to include fish from a foreign country. They had their strongest hold in Chicago. All members were required to give up their slave master's name and accept an X to replace their last name, or they were given an Arabic name or chose one of their own. Black men in the FOI ranks were motivated to to perfection by being told by Messenger Muhammad that you are the best, the most powerful, and the wisest. He told them that they were members of the last found tribe of Shabazz, and that God, the supreme being, was a black man, a real living and breathing human in the person of Master W.D. Fard Muhammad. So I guess he was in Christ, or what how Christians think Christ is the way they believed in W.D. Fard Muhammad, to whom all praise is due forever. Muslims were told to stop using drugs and alcohol to get to work to support themselves. People who did not understand the teachings considered Muslims strange. Conclusion: uniquely, practically all of the religious doctrines taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad have been purposely omitted or removed from public record. Muhammad and all he stood for has been hidden and written out of history books despite all he helped blacks to accomplish. Accomplish. Yes, sir, accomplish. When black or white historians, that's what we're reading the words. That's right. We're reading the words, just like I need you to use your words. You have to talk more. Right? Right. All right. That's fine with me. Muhammad and all he stood for has been hidden and written out of history books despite all he helped blacks to accomplish. When black or white historians document African American existence in this country, they tend to conventionally leave out any detailed sketch of the Nation of Islam, what it stood for, what they believe in, and their social and political positions. The success of his work is not recognized by the educated class, and no thought or value is given to any of his teachings. Black teachers tend to treat Mr. Muhammad as if he were an embarrassing hindrance to progress instead of the black lifesaver he actually was. His means and methods are considered outdated and too morally restricted for modern blacks, and his morally restricting for modern blacks. And his ideas are also rejected because Muhammad was not for integration, taught against mixing with whites, and pointed them out as the open enemy of the black man. He maintained that blacks did not need personal association or support from the whites in order to be so successful and happy. For over 40 years, the Nation of Islam, under the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, represented the only stable example of black men working together to better their lives, without voting or integrating with Europeans. After Muhammad's untimely death in 1975, his son Wallace Muhammad was elected to replace his father's leadership and inherit his power over the Muslims. Within 1 year, his son set about dismantling, discrediting, and changing every aspect of what his father had given his life to build for black people. Imam Wallace Deen Muhammad chose Eastern Orthodox Islam for the Muslims and told them that it was the real Islam and that it was blasphemous to believe that God was a mortal man. The new Imam dispensed with the notion that whites were devils and allowed them to attend his services. Okay, that's what happened. He happened. He like they Rehoboam. He put a Rehoboam. The new imam dispensed with the notion that the whites were devils and allowed them to attend the services, gave them equality on the podium, and former FOI members began dating and marrying white women and bringing them to the temple. Wallace slash Warith also relaxed dress codes, beards for the brothers, and makeup for the sisters. Don't tear my pages. Give me that. Don't tear my pages. Calm down. After several embarrassing years of internal administrative strife, complicated changes in religious belief, and wavering temple attendance, the newly designed American Muslim mission faltered as a national vibrant organization and are now seldom seen, existing only in a few disconnected locations. Over the years following Messenger Muhammad's death, his family members fought brutal public legal battles in court over the money, land, furnishing, vehicles, equipment, literature, and property that had been worked for and financed for 40 years by nearly 5 million Black Muslim followers registered in the nation under Messenger Muhammad's ideas. His survivors used European law guidelines to divide the spoils, and the general believers were left out of any calculation for distribution of their investment. Muhammad's extended family and others split the profits and disappeared, unhampered by demands for financial accountability. Rumors were also spread charging Messenger Muhammad with questionable conduct and secrecy regarding aspects of his personal life. Opposing groups have arisen, and because of their squabbling and disunity, caused the nation to lose its credibility and respect from onlookers. Some, having ravaged Muhammad's original teachings, added their own interpretations and eliminated any parts they disagreed with. Muhammad's followers, after briefly trying to adhere to and understand the new confusing guidelines, pulled out, dismayed, and often returned to the Judeo-Christian mysterious religion Messenger Muhammad spent his entire life disproving. None of the Blackman Muslim leaders who appointed themselves as his spiritual descendant are as recognized or respected as Messenger Muhammad. Hey, wake up. You gotta eat. You gotta eat your rice and bread. You gotta go eat something. You gotta eat. That's why I need you to stay up. All right. What you did right there. Possibly the most outstanding accomplishment of Mr. Muhammad was that he never changed a word of his teachings from the first day he started to the last. No matter what the social climate was or the political temperament of the people, he stuck to his position, working to get the Black man to reclaim his own name, religion, and peaceful way of life. Throughout his career, other non-Muslim Black leaders stole portions of his program to build their own political platforms. The remaining splinter groups are led by Blackman leaders, Minister Louis Farrakhan, Silas Muhammad, John Muhammad, and a few lesser-known others. The infamous 5 Percenters are an alternate group organized by Brother Clarence 13X, now deceased. They are mostly younger Black males who study secret teachings, perform rituals, learn poems and other activities that Clarence 13X made up to give them a unique cultural identity, and inspirational information. All of the new black men, Muslim leaders, offer a slightly modified rendition of the original Islamic espoused by Messenger Muhammad, and their followers, due to youth, inexperience, and lack of knowledge, do not know the difference. None of the remaining groups operate or maintain the types of institutions or goals that Muhammad previously demonstrated. Due to occasional clashes with the police and newspaper and TVs, stories depicted the Muslims as teaching racial hate and black supremacy. Many Negroes were frightened away from the Nation of Islam. Any black man leader who adopts any part of Mr. Muhammad's economic teachings shortly becomes successful. His ideas have endured and his predictions are coming true. I think I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. The next one is Clayton Powell Jr. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop there. Let me see. I'll read one more. I'll read Adam Clayton Powell Jr. We're gonna stop and start with Carmichael. Adam Clayton Powell Jr., 1908 to 1972. Started out as associate pastor of the largest Black Baptist church in the world, the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, with his father, Adam Clayton Powell Sr. As the civil rights movement began to pick up momentum during the 1940s, Reverend Powell became involved in picketing white-owned businesses in Black neighborhoods that depended on Negro patronage but had no colored employees. At that time, groups employed boycotting tactics to force white establishments to hire Blacks. New York's famous 125th Street became the employment target of Reverend Powell. He claimed to represent the new Negro, who was educated, politically astute, and bold enough to demand equal treatment. He referred to his picketers as marching Blacks. He fought for the common man and woman who lived in New York. He participated in the Harlem Renaissance of revitalization. The Harlem Renaissance of revitalization of Negro artists, writers, poets, musicians, and singers as an illumination of Negro life. He was a commanding speaker and drew huge crowds to his church sermons and was able to gain support from his membership to confront racism in America. Powell was elected to Congress in 1945 and served until 1970. He was appointed chairman of the House Labor and Education Committee. During his services under President John F. Kennedy, he was, with his new frontier ideas of civic and social responsibility of the government, Powell helped between 1961 to 66 to push new rules he felt would benefit Negroes. He endorsed minimum wage laws, entitlement projects, aid to elementary and secondary education, vocational rehab, school lunch programs, anti-juvenile delinquency acts, and worked to eliminate discrimination against women. At that time, practically every Negro in the land was in love with and supportive of President Kennedy. They viewed him as sensitive, sincere, and on their side. They admired Reverend Powell too. Conclusion. Powell believed that he should mingle with the white power structure if they sympathized with his efforts to create better job opportunities, of voting benefits for Negroes in Harlem. He was such a handsome and intelligent speaker that he was able to penetrate the ears of the black middle class and underclass. He was very much involved in American politics and thought that his presence in Congress would facilitate many long-range advancements for his people. He organized marches and protests using non-violent means of pressure. He was a Christian assistant minister of a popular church. He did not encourage blacks to go into business for themselves and create their own business. Their own jobs. He fought to get them employed in enterprises. Employed in enterprises already built by whites. Already built by whites. He believed it was simpler for them to use force hirings, since blacks shopped and spent their money with white shopkeepers, than to tell them to open their own businesses and stop spending their money in white-owned establishments. He was quite proud of his dignified sounding name. He was not a separatist and talked harder than he really acted. Black culture was not on his agenda, but he did want blacks to believe that they were just as qualified to do a job as any white person was. The government was still dealing with many of the issues raised during the war on poverty era of the 1960s and 1970s. Special interest groups espoused the need for women in politics and more aid to needy families and parity of wages and promotion for both genders. Prison reform and other political social issues are still debating the validity of enacting laws to support these positions. He became impressed with his personal achievements and believed he was in the in crowd in Washington until they ousted him for trying to have two women, one of which was famed jazz organist Shirley Scott, his wife, and for coming up funny with the money entrusted to his government budget. Employment for blacks in Harlem and other highly populated urban boroughs of New York have steadily declined over the years. 125th Street is filled with many boarded up businesses and landmarks, and the majority of the remaining stores are owned by Asians, Latinos, and whites, offering commercial products to the African American population living there. The so-called war on poverty is lost. Poverty won, and few, if any, of Powell's political advancements remain viable today. His final fall from grace with the Negro public was when he was exposed by the media to be allegedly participating in immoral conduct with his secretary on the Isle of Bimini and misappropriation of funds. However, Congressman Powell was a dynamic, brave black man who just used his talents pursuing the wrong goals. There is an Adam Clayton Powell III. Due to Congressman Powell dying so close on the heels of Martin Luther King Jr. and having been out of the public's eye for a few years, he did not receive the kind of recognition he so well earned and deserved. That's part two. That's part two of The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man by Shahrazad Ali. We're going to come back tomorrow with Stokely Carmichael, and we'll finish the book. We'll finish up the book tomorrow with part 3. Some good stuff on the brothers, you know. What can we learn and grow from today? What can still be used, you know, today? What can be done now? What can you change in yourself if need be? Yeah, but man, thank y'all for listening. And like, comment, subscribe. Check out Miss Shahrazad Ali. She's on Amazon and eBay. You can order her books. If it's something that you wouldn't mind having in your library, like I do. And let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. And until next time, shalom, shalom. Let's learn and grow, man. Reading with Shilo. Shilo out.